Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the Recovery Plug. What's happening, man? I hope you guys are doing great today. I know my day is going pretty good. Well, check this out. Before we get this video podcast started, if you would please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the serenity. Pray for the addict who still suffers. For those of us who are still bound down to some sort of struggle, man, that keeps us from moving forward in this toxic life that we live in. So yeah, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Alrighty, well, what's happening, man? Well, check this out, man. I got a little message for you guys today. I think y'all will enjoy it. And this message today is I'm kind of answering a message that I got, if you will. Someone, a subscriber, messaged me and asked me if they wanted to know my take, I guess, on the Bhagavata, the Bhagavad Gita, and so I'm gonna break down. Well, I guess I'm just gonna talk about a little bit of what I think about it and how I think it interrelates with Buddhism and just my take on my personal, my personal feelings about it and that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah. So we'll you know what? Give me a second. Let me see. Let's check this out real quick. Is this it? No. Is that it? No. Okay. Well, I thought that I had it here, but well, we'll go with this one, I guess. This is just one of the books that I have, because I'm reading a couple of in my collection of reading material that I'm doing. I do a lot of reading, and so a few of the books that I got that I've started, and so what I like to do is I read a little bit, every day of different books and that sort of thing, just because I want to understand them, know the spiritual concepts, and learn the way of that particular spiritual journey in the authors and in their practice, right? And the different books, different practices, different religions, different spiritual practices, and that sort of thing. But so I like to kind of get the interpretations of other people's lenses, you know what I'm saying? Because everybody thinks about things differently, and when you can, correlate, these studies of different intellectual people in their studies and bring them into yours, and it allows you to understand things in a different perspective sometimes, and even explains it on certain things that perhaps you may be puzzled with, right? And I know that for a fact. I go through a lot of that because there's a lot of celestial and mythical stories and literature and concepts and that sort of thing in every religious sect. So when you can break those things down and understand them in layman's terms, in a sense, then it makes a whole lot more sense to you when you're studying and reading and practicing spiritually, right? So one of the ones that I've been that I picked up, it's the Gita Sutras, and this is 18 Life Essentials, and this is the book right here. Very good book. I haven't read the whole thing, but it's on my list that I'm one of the things that I am reading. And let me put this thing back. And another one that I'm doing is I'm in the middle of this one right here, which is I picked up at a local bookstore, and it's the Science of Realization. And this one's actually a very good book, and it's this book here. So this also speaks volumes of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Gita itself that I picked up through the interpretations of Srila Prabhupada, and not only that, but I have some friends that I discuss these subjects with, and one of the guys who is part of that circle is an older gentleman. I don't know how old he is, but he's either in his, I think he's in his 70s, maybe reaching 80 or something like that. But he's an older gentleman, and he is part responsible for the Bhagavad Gita being translated into Spanish. And this is how the Bhagavad Gita was distributed to, Spanish speaking people in Mexico and South America and that sort of thing. He's a Colombian guy who walked and practiced under Srila Prabhupada in the 60s and 70s. So he stood right next to Srila Prabhupada and helped out and even chauffeured him around a few times and that sort of thing. So he was a disciple, a devotee, and when he speaks, I really like listening to him because he speaks of truth. He speaks of a person who's actually there with this person who interprets this Bhagavad Gita, which is a beautiful scriptures. You know what I mean? And so what I want to talk to you about is that Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Gita and Buddhism and how they correlate in a sense, and because they're so similar. And I'm gonna get these glasses on so that I can read my notes. So yeah, okay. So what we got here is now again the Bhagavad Gita comes from the Hindu epic of the Mahabharata, and was composed between I think. From what I researched, between the 5th and 2nd century BCE. And then Buddhism and the Gita grew out of the same ancient Indian spiritual world. So they share themes, they share things like karma, meditation, liberation, those types of things. But they diverge sharply on the nature of the self and the role of your God, a God, right? And you know what? If you can just give me just a second, because these glasses here are not very good. I need to go get another pair, so bear with me. Give me like 2 seconds. I'll be right back. Alrighty. Sorry about the interruption, but hey, man, I got to be able to read, right? So here we go. Now, this is better. Okay, so yeah, so where the Bhagavad Gita comes from is exactly that. It's translated as this song of God, right? And it's a 700 verse section of the Mahabharata, the Vedic scriptures, and one of the it's one of the India's great epic, I guess literature or stories and of that sort of thing. And most a lot of scholars and that sort of thing place its composition after the lifetime of the historical Buddha. You know what I mean? So who lived around the 5th century BCE, and this means that the Gita emerges in a world where Buddhism, Jainism, Vedic ritualism, they already existed. You know what I'm saying? And the Vedic ritualism was being questioned at the time, right? And they because there was this new spiritual movement that was rising, and this is where I guess I'm assuming that this is where they grabbed this Bhagavad Gita that came from the Mahabharata, that this was something that really stood out to them, I guess, at that time. But anyway, and the story of this, the story behind this is this very famous story that it's a mythological celestial story. So it's these beings of celestial things and all that stuff, and it is it takes place on this battlefield where this warrior Arjuna is in this moral crisis because he's in war right now. You know what I mean? It's this picture this. You're in war, and this guy is leading the troops, and he figures out, or he realizes that he's got to go up against his own family. On the other side of the battlefield are his blood people. You know what I'm saying? People that he's related to. And he's having this nervous breakdown in the middle of this whole thing, and he's asking Krishna, which is in the story, Krishna is portrayed as the charioteer, this divine guidance for him. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's got this aura around him, and this is Krishna, right? And which is God, and in the battlefield, it's symbolic because it represents the inner struggle of human life. You know what I'm saying? It's a mental thing that he's going through right now. You know what I'm saying? And how ironic that it's mental. You know what I mean? Everything that we do in this world, we're in this mental state. We're in this mental world. You know what I'm saying? Anything that you do in your life comes first through this little mental world that you have with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Nothing comes out of what you're doing. None of your actions are just actions that just happen because they happen. No, there's things they went through your mental thought process in order for them to be in action, right? So this is a really big thing here, and so that's the story behind it, right? That's where it starts, and how the Bhagavad Gita connects to Buddhism would be the Gita and Buddhism, they grew out of the same spiritual world in a sense, you know, the same spiritual ecosystem, if you will, and of ancient India, and so they share certain themes, but they move to these deep metaphysical physicalities type things, right? And we're going to break a little bit of that down, and there's a couple of common shared things, common grounds that they share, and which is non-attachment, meditation, ethical actions, and liberation from suffering, and we'll get into that a little bit here, and what with the first one, which was non-attachment. In the Gita, it means acting without attachment to results. In other words, the karma yoga. And then in the Buddhism is acting without craving or clinging, which is the Tanya. That these are non-identical, but they rhyme. They are a little different, but one and the same in a sense. You know what I'm saying? And in meditation, they share that same thing. They share meditation, and both traditions emphasize on this, that they emphasize on concentration, equanimity, master of the mind. And the Gita teaches on meditation in chapter 6, and sounds very close to early Buddhist dhyana instructions in a sense. You know what I'm saying? They have these very similar correlations on that, and you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, the meditation that they're doing, the yoga that they're doing, is the Bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, and these are the devotees. These are devotees who are devoted to Krishna himself, to Krishna the God. You know what I'm saying? Godhead, if you will. And in Buddhism, it's similar, because in Buddhism we also are doing the meditation and yoga to alleviate, to get rid of the suffering of all sentient beings, not only ourselves. You know what I'm saying? We want to alleviate the suffering of everyone, and that's the correlation there. You know what I'm saying? And in the ethical actions, both emphasize compassion, self-discipline, restraint, and clarity of intention. You know what I'm saying? And that is to me one of the beauties of the phenomena of this, that this automatically happens when you start practicing, whether it's in the Bhagavad-gita or in Buddhism. You know what I'm saying? You start cultivating and nurturing this Buddha nature seed, this good seed that we all have. You know what I mean? And it starts allowing you to it allows you to look at life and the things that you're doing through the eyes of compassion, self-discipline, restraint, clarity, that you're trying to do things for the better, great good of everybody, not only yourself. You want to do this for you know that your actions are affecting not only yourself but all sentient beings. You know what I'm saying? So you're really dedicating yourself to this practice, to a spiritual practice, to a spiritual divine practice, I guess you could say. And they also both are have in common is the liberation from suffering, which we just kind of talked about. But both traditions are concerned with ignorance, delusion, and the cycle of rebirth. In other words, they believe in the Krishna perspectives, believe in this God, Krishna, and that in the way to relieve the ignorance and the delusion of life and the cycle of rebirth is through devoting yourself to Krishna himself, through the acts of a good devotee, the kindness, the acts that you do when you're distributing, you're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, or you're gathering in your sangha, your communities, and doing, partaking in prasadam and that sort of thing, and it's just a great practice, right? And in Buddhism, it's the same way, which is you're trying to alleviate suffering and the delusion of this life of samsara and the cycle of birth and death, and in the same way that you're not only doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for all sentient beings. You're like kind of reserving you, knowing that yours will come, but you want to alleviate, you do the good deeds for everybody else. You know what I mean? No matter who they are and where they come from and what they do. You know what I mean? You see the good, and that's that good seed of wanting to be a good person, and this wholeheartedness that we all have. You know what I'm saying? And which gets buried down in these illusions of the world we live in through a bunch of social media, drug addiction, sexual encounters, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? A bunch of different things that protract, that divert your mind from a good spiritual practice, right? And in this world, we get sidetracked real quick, man. If you don't practice on the daily, you can find yourself in this cyclical type of living, and wondering why you're always stuck in this rut, in a sense. And it's one of the reasons. And anyway, again, a couple of big differences, I guess we can, in the Bhagavad Gita, it mainly teaches of eternal Atman, in a sense, identical with Brahman. And what this means is Atman means the self. You know what I mean? It's talking about you're one and the same with this Atman, with this Brahman, in a sense. You know what I mean? And in Buddhism, it teaches anatta, which is no self, no permanent essence. In other words, it's almost the same thing but different, because you're still believing in you and everything else, but you realize that you're really nothing, because you're really one and the same. You know what I'm saying? If you break it down, we are really one and the same. If we break it down into these minute things, because this is where a lot of this what do you call it? What is the term? The scientific term? Was it relativity, or? Oh my gosh, I forgot the scientific term. But anyway, it's where things get broken down into these minute pieces, right? Just micro things. And if you see, you break down this body of a human, and you break down this tree that's next to you, and you're going to realize that it's the same at the end. You know what I'm saying? We're really just one and the same. And that's the beauty of that. That's the self. You know what I'm saying? And okay, now this as far as God goes, this is where a lot of people have, I guess, their thing about, oh, okay, you don't believe in God, you do, whatever, right? But it's in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is a personal Godhead. Devotion to him is a path to liberation. That's the belief, right? And in Buddhism, it's no creator God. Liberation comes through insight. In other words, in the Bhagavad Gita, in Krishna, the devotees are devoting themselves to God. They know that they have this Godhead, but it's a personal God. You know what I mean? Notice that it didn't say just the God. It says Krishna is a personal God. And that is where that's the fine line to me of the phenomena of that, because in Buddhism, we're saying, okay, no creator, its liberation comes through insight. In other words, liberation comes from the practice of the Dharma, believing in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and knowing that ultimately we are nothing. If we're broken down, we become this particle, if you will, to wherever we came from. You know what I mean? Just as the tree, we're the same. And in this is to live a life, because we don't know where we're going after death, right? That's the phenomena. That's the $1 million question, if you will. But we do know, this is just my personal opinion right here, that I know that I have this belief of this soul and this faith that there's this spiritual presence of a divine energy in the world, in the universe, and by my actions here on earth is going to project what happens to me when I am no longer on the earth. And I believe that if I do nothing, then this is where we get stuck in that cyclical form of samsara, of life of suffering, because you did nothing, absolutely nothing to purify your karmic energy. You wind up in the same process. In other words, in another realm, maybe perhaps in another lifetime, you're still in this world of suffering. You're stuck. You know what I'm saying? But if you practice this divine way of living, this karmic purification way of life, which is the same thing that the devotion to God himself, to the personal God that you're doing with Krishna, is the same thing. You're both living in this purified type way of living to purify your karmic self, so that you present yourself to this, if you can call it God, you can call it a divine matrix, you can call it, whatever it is that you want to call it. But you're, in other words, doing the same process to get to the same place. You know what I'm saying? And so that is the God part, I guess, of it. I mean, that's my interpretation, right? And maybe others have different. That's a good thing about always learning with new people, is that you get other people's perspective on meanings of things, and no one's really, I mean, maybe it's right or wrong, I have no idea, but it's always good to get someone else's feed, because it allows you to understand things more. You know what I'm saying? And kind of maybe polish your vision up a little bit. And but anyway, the liberation part in the Bhagavad Gita, liberation is the union with the divine, Brahman, Krishna. And in Buddhism, liberation is nirvana, the extinguishing of craving and ignorance. And it's the same thing. You can't get to Brahman and Krishna by not purifying the things that you do in your life. You know what I'm saying? If you do nothing, don't expect to hang out with Krishna. You know what I'm saying? That I guess in Christian perspective is you can't just accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and expect to be good. That doesn't happen that way. There's work behind that. You know what I'm saying? And this is the extinguishing of the craving and ignorance in Buddhism. You know what I'm saying? This is the path. This is the turning of the Dharma wheel. This is the Dharma in practice. You know what I mean? This is the action. This is the action part, which is the 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 action yoga is the karma yoga. You know what I'm saying? And both Bhagavad Gita and Buddhism it believe that, right? And now, as far as let me see. Did I talk about this part or not? Let me see. We'll go down a little bit more and let me see what else I wrote down here. Okay. And just as a clean, just as a little bit of a kind of a summarized little paragraph that I want to share with you guys is the Bhagavad Gita comes from the Mahabharata and was written in a time when Buddhism was already flourishing. You know what I'm saying? Imagine that. And I don't know the exact timeline. You know what I'm saying? I've studied it before, but I don't just know it off the top of my head. But you know, could you imagine that this Bhagavad Gita comes from the Mahabharata, and it was written in a time when Buddhism was already there. You know what I'm saying? And this is way before Christ also. You know what I'm saying? And so they shared themes like meditation, non-attachment, and ethical action because they grew out of the same cultural soil. I love that because it comes from the same place. You know what I'm saying? And it's just when you have this thing that comes from the same, it's just like we all say you all come from your mom, but when it's different people, now your lens of the world is different. You know what I'm saying? Your lens is different than your sisters and your brothers and your uncle and your grandma. You know what I'm saying? You understand that concept? And also, they diverge sharply on the nature of the self, the role of God, and the meaning of liberation. And that I think it's like I said in Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is your personal God. And when I hear that, it always brings me back to the 12 steps of NA and AA programs. You know what I'm saying? It says that you believe in the God of your understanding. You know what I'm saying? And when you can do that with these concepts of good Buddha nature, of good human nature, of wholesome acts in your life, you know what I'm saying? Then good always comes out of that. Never has there ever been something good with something good equals something bad. It doesn't happen that way. That's the natural laws of cause and effect, my friends, is when you do good, good things happen. When you do bad, guess what? Bad things happen. You know what I'm saying? If your mental capacity is always thinking negative and thinking, you know, in jealous mode or in envy mode or in hatred mode, well, then guess what's going to happen? That's the life that's going to come out of your thought process. You know what I mean? The actions that you do are going to mirror exactly what's happening in that thought process of yours. You know what I'm saying? So if you polish it to this way of living, whether it's the Krishna way, whether it's the Buddha way, whether it's the Christian way, Catholic way, Hindu, Islam, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It all has Buddha nature. It all has the good, wholesome seed. You just have to cultivate it the right way. You know what I'm saying? And that's that's my take, man, on the relation between the Bhagavad Gita and Buddhism, man. And it's like, it's in Hinduism, in the Bhagavad, they believe that Buddha is a reincarnation of Vishnu. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's so interconnected and a bunch of similarities, man. You know what I mean? But it's a great way to live, I believe. You know what I mean? And that's my journey, man. You know what I'm saying? Right now, that's my journey. It's beautiful. I love it. And And I'll keep studying, man. And the more I study, the more things I learn, man. Just guess what? That's what I'm going to share with you guys here on this channel, so that somebody else can understand and hear the concepts of different spiritual, practices, and how they interrelate in a world of somebody who suffers from addiction, PTSD, depression, grief, suicidal thoughts. You know what I mean? All those types of things. Trauma. Childhood trauma. I've suffered through many, many different things in my lifetime, and guess what, man? You know what? I know a way out. And my way out could be your way out. You know what I mean? It's a possibility. But anyway, if you would, please, man, at this time, hit that subscribe button. Please share my channel. The only way to spread the message is to share, right? So I really appreciate you guys watching my videos, man. And I hope that you got something out of the message today, man. And I hope that my energies touch your energies, and we have you. I hope that you have a good day, man. So again, share my channel. Thank you very much for watching. You know what? I am the Recovery Plug.